Hi YouTube! Today is another video discussing my experience with exporting my dog from Canada to Australia. In this video, I will be discussing my experience and timeline with the Rnatt blood draw and results, and then getting that endorsed and all the import permit and post-entry quarantine timeline. Now we're into August of 2023, and the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today actually started happening way back in March. I would have posted about this sooner, but we've had a really busy year getting married, etc. So we are discussing it today. If you are new here and you're here for the dog export to Australia videos, I did post a first video on this, which is all the steps before the Rnatt, so stuff like the identity verification. I will link that video up here if you want to go back and watch that one first. So where we left off last time is I had taken Ricardo to the food inspection agency nearest me, which is about 40 minutes away. You don't really know if your identity verification was successful or not until you actually get your import permit, which I will get into in a little bit here. So the steps after your identity verification is to do the Rnatt test, which is basically a rabies titer test to make sure that your dog is immune to rabies, I'm pretty sure, or has been vaccinated against rabies, which he has. In Canada, you're actually required to do that. So on March 21st, March 21st. So on March 24th is the day that Ricardo had his blood draw for the Rnatt test. The blood actually gets sent from here down to Texas, I believe. So I actually forgot to write down at what point the Rnatt test results came in, like the physical copy, but on April 24th is when I had the Rnatt declaration endorsed by the food inspection agency. So that is about a month of time that passed from the blood draw to the time that I was able to get to the endorsement. The identity verification in Canada is free, but the endorsement for the Rnatt declaration isn't. I think I paid like $33. I will do an entirely separate video on all the costs that incurred throughout this process. If you're here and you want to know how much it costs, just know that it's a lot. The price that you think it is probably more than that. So after I had the Rnatt declaration endorsed, I actually applied for the import permit the day after. I just had some questions with the application to my pet exporter before I was actually able to submit the import permit. Some good little nuggets of information that I would have found helpful when I was filling out my import permit is that you need to have an Australian address for the import permit, which is obviously tricky because we aren't in Australia yet, but you can pretty much use anyone's address. I just used a friend's address down there. So April 25th is the day that I applied for the import permit, and the import permit got approved on June 6th. So that is 6 weeks of time it took for the import permit to be granted. When I was going through this, that's actually a little bit less time than I thought it was gonna take, because I was hearing that they were taking around 4 months to be granted. So 6 weeks is what it took for me. I'm not sure if they've caught up even more, but when I was doing this, I'm not sure if they've caught up even more, but when I did it, it was a 6-week wait for the import permit. And so the day that the import permit was granted, which was June 6th, I obviously immediately applied for the post-entry quarantine dates. When I had initially applied for the quarantine date, I was seeing online that people were getting dates booked into like November, December. And when I applied in June, that is obviously a lot of time ahead of when you're applying. So they were very, very backed up. We were hoping to get an October quarantine date. I think on my application, I actually applied for something like October 31st and not really expecting to get that. So June 6th, applied for my post-entry quarantine date, and then 5 weeks later on June 12th, my post-entry quarantine date was approved, and we actually got the date I requested, which was October 31st, which was also kind of a shock because online people were getting like December dates. So I don't know if they hired more people or they streamlined stuff, but I was seeing a lot of people actually get earlier dates, which was a relief. So our timeline for us wanting to go ended up being pushed about 2 weeks or so to make it work with the quarantine date, which is fine. We're not in a super big rush, but November was kind of the spot where we didn't really want to push it any farther. If you applied for quarantine and you didn't get the date that you wanted, it's actually a lot farther than what you applied for. It is worth it to be put on the wait list. I was seeing online that a lot of people that were on the wait list actually did get called from the wait list and got an earlier date than they had originally been given. So if you get a date that you're not happy with, it is worthwhile to be put on the wait list. I was fortunate enough to get the date that I wanted. So an overview of how long this entire process will have taken me from start to finish. The first step that I did for the identity verification, I did on March 17th, and my dog will arrive in Australia on October 31st. So that is almost 7 months exactly it took to go from beginning to end. So if you're someone who's hoping to move a dog or a cat from Canada to Australia, start it as soon as you can, with also paying attention to the expiry of the RNATTs. I think as time goes on, Australia's quarantine and agriculture section will start being a little bit quicker processing applications, but in my experience it will have taken 7 months total. That just reminded me about knowing if your identity verification went through and if your dog is going to do the 10 or the 30-day stay in quarantine. Once I received the actual import permit, if you look through that document, it says in there somewhere about a 10 or a 30-day stay. So if it says minimum 10 days, you know that your identity verification was successful and the dog is doing 10 days. So now we are here almost at the end of August. The next steps that I have to do with the dog are his final vet appointments. So those include the parasite treatments, some vaccines, as well as figuring out what I'm gonna do about the canine influenza vaccine. If you are in Canada and doing this process, just know as of right now, nowhere in Canada can access the canine influenza vaccine. So you either have to source it from outside of Canada somehow or go into the States to get it. I will update more on that in the next video, as right now I don't actually know what's happening with that. So he has all his final vet appointments booked except for that canine influenza, and his quarantine stay is booked. We do still have to book his flight, but I believe you can't do that until I think 5 days before he's supposed to go. I'm not sure. My exporter is handling that, and I will update you guys on that as well in the future. It's so surreal to think that we both fly in about 2 months all the way to Australia. It's stressful, but I'm also excited to be there and have him there with us. Thanks so much for watching. If this video helped you at all with your pet export from Canada to Australia, or you'd like to see more of our journey to Australia, please don't forget to subscribe to be notified when I post new videos. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!